Some nights aren't about sleep. They're about what was left behind, the shirt she wore, and nothing else. The name she whispered and never gave back. The slip she left on your chair, still warm, still shaped to her hips, still saying, I was here, and you were mine. Tonight, I'll whisper 3 stories. Each one remembers her, not with photos, but with fabric, with breath, with the sound a body makes when it chooses you. So lie back, loosen something, and let me tell you, not every goodbye is spoken. Some are folded neatly and left behind. It started with a knock I wasn't expecting. I just returned from the kind of day that makes the evening feel like an apology. The city outside my window still hummed, neon spilling across the ceiling of my apartment, washing the wooden floor in soft pinks and blues. I had no plans, no one waiting, no reason to look at my phone. Then the knock. Not hurried, not hesitant, just inevitable. I opened the door, and there she was, the one I'd almost written off as a dream. Hair slightly damp from the rain, a bookstore bag tucked under one arm, wearing the same trench coat I remembered from that rainy afternoon 3 months ago when we first met. She hadn't texted in weeks, but she didn't say hi. She said, "Do you still sleep in that white shirt?" I didn't answer. I stepped aside. She walked in. She dropped the bag on my kitchen counter like she'd done it before, slipped off her shoes, looked around the apartment with the kind of silence that knew where everything was, but pretended to be discovering it all over again. We weren't lovers, not officially. We'd had one weekend, one quiet, slow, wine-soaked weekend in March, where we didn't sleep so much as drift between moments, between kisses and confessions, and the kind of closeness that made saying goodbye feel indecent. But then the silence grew, as it does, and yet here she was, back, as if nothing had happened, as if everything had. She turned toward me in the low lamplight and whispered, "I didn't bring anything to sleep in." My throat tightened, and before I could speak, she added, "But I remember how soft that shirt was." She meant the one hanging on the back of my chair, the old, oversized button-down I wore when I didn't plan on being seen. White cotton, faded collar, threads loosening at the wrists. She'd worn it that weekend once, unbuttoned halfway, dancing barefoot while Billie Holiday played from my phone. I handed it to her without saying a word. She disappeared into the bathroom, and for a few seconds, the apartment held its breath. The quiet was different. It wasn't the quiet of solitude. It was the quiet of anticipation, of memories stretching awake from where they'd been folded and put away. When she returned, the coat was gone. She wore only the shirt, not fully buttoned, not fully closed. She didn't need to be. The hem barely kissed her thighs, and the sleeves swallowed her hands. She leaned against the door frame like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I hadn't yet written. She wasn't posing, she wasn't trying, she just was. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, tugging one side of the shirt gently across her chest. I shook my head. I've never seen it look better. She padded across the floor, barefoot, and sat on the edge of my bed like it was hers. She didn't say anything more. She just looked at me, with that unspoken question in her eyes. Can we pretend nothing ever stopped? And I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I sat beside her, close, but not touching. Not yet. The lamp beside the bed buzzed softly, the kind of warm glow that made time slow down. Outside, the rain tapped gently on the windows, as if to remind us it had brought her here. I didn't want to go back to my place, she murmured, her voice nearly a whisper. It's full of everything I've tried to forget. I nodded. I didn't ask questions. I never needed her reasons. We lay back slowly. Her head found the spot beneath my collarbone, like it always had. The place where her breathing matched mine. My hand drifted to her waist and rested there, not to pull her closer, just to say, I'm here. The fabric of the shirt was soft against my skin, the warmth of her beneath it, softer still. We didn't kiss. Not then. We just lay there, listening to the rain, listening to the hush of the moment before something begins. I miss this smell, she said quietly. What smell? She inhaled, eyes closed. You. And in that moment, I realized some people don't return to you for a second chance. They return for one more night, to remember, to hold something they didn't know they'd left behind. I didn't know then what the night would mean. I didn't know that by morning I'd be alone again, that her shirt would hang from the edge of the bed, and her name would still live somewhere between the sheets and the silence. All I knew was that she'd chosen tonight, and she'd chosen my shirt. And as her breath deepened beside me, as her fingers curled softly around my sleeve like they had before, I closed my eyes and let myself believe, just for tonight, that she hadn't left at all. I woke up before the sun did. The city hadn't stirred yet. No sirens, no horns, just the low electric hum of existence outside my window. I opened my eyes slowly, unsure if the quiet warmth in the room was still her, or just the echo of her. But she was there, curled beside me, one leg tangled loosely over mine. My white shirt barely clung to her shoulder, sliding down like it, too, wanted to rest. Her lips were parted just enough for breath to pass. Her hand still held the sleeve of my shirt like a forgotten promise. I watched her sleep, not in a way that demanded anything, just in a way that tried to remember. It had been months, months of messages not sent, nights not shared, questions I never asked. But the curve of her body under cotton, the softness of her bare thigh brushing mine, it didn't feel like the past had passed. It felt like it was still unfolding, still whispering, still undecided. She shifted slightly, as if sensing the weight of my gaze. Her eyes fluttered open, slow and warm, like the first sip of coffee on a winter morning. And then, that half smile, the one I'd carried in the pocket of every thought since March. "I thought you'd still be asleep," she said, voice husky from dreaming. "I didn't want to miss it," I replied. "Miss what?" "This. You. In my shirt." She laughed softly, a laugh that lived in the back of her throat and never needed to reach the room to be felt. "It smells like you," she murmured, tugging the collar closer to her face. "You already said that last night." "I know, but it still does." I didn't move. I didn't want to break the spell, whatever it was. She sat up slowly, brushing her hair back, that familiar, unintentional intimacy that always came just before she distanced herself. And for a moment, I thought she was leaving, but instead, she pulled her legs under her, still cross-legged in my shirt, and turned to face me. "Do you remember what I said the last time I left?" she asked. "You didn't say anything." "Exactly." The word hung there, like a weight neither of us knew how to carry anymore. "I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say I'd come back. I didn't even leave a note," she added. "But I took something." I blinked. "What?" "Your silence. You didn't call. You didn't chase. You let me go." She looked almost angry, or maybe hurt, or maybe just exhausted. "I thought you wanted that," I said quietly. "I thought I did too, until I realized I was waiting for you to not let me leave." We sat there, the city beginning to yawn outside the windows. A beam of light crawled across the floor and touched the hem of the shirt hanging off her thigh. She looked down at it, then back at me. "Do you ever wonder," she said, "if we weren't finished yet?" I hesitated, but not because I didn't know. Every night, the silence that followed wasn't cold. It was charged, like the moment before thunder, like the second you realize a door wasn't closed all the way. She slid closer, not quite touching me, just close enough for warmth to meet warmth. "I wore this shirt in my apartment," she admitted, "twice, just to feel like I hadn't forgotten. I slept in it, with nothing else, and I remembered how quiet your breathing gets when you're falling asleep, how you always turn toward me in your sleep, how your bed smells like cedar and regret." That last one stung, because it was true. "Then why didn't you come back?" I asked. She traced the edge of my sheet with one finger, as if it could answer for her. "I thought we were a beautiful mistake," she whispered. "One of those moments that feels like forever when it's happening, but only because you know it won't last." "You think this is a mistake?" I asked. "No," she said, eyes lifting to meet mine. "I think leaving was." And that was when her hand found mine, not in the way lovers intertwine fingers, but in the way someone reaches for something they didn't realize they missed until it was offered again. Our hands rested on the sheet between us, bare skin to bare skin, a quiet truce. "I didn't come here to fix anything," she said softly. "I just wanted to know if you'd still let me in." "I never locked the door," I told her. A minute passed, then another. The city awakened in waves. A car door slammed somewhere below. A dog barked 2 stories down. The soft whistle of a kettle in the neighboring apartment. But in here, in that stillness of morning, with her wearing only the shirt I stopped wearing after she left, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Hope. Quiet. Earnest. Fragile. But there. She leaned in, pressed her forehead gently to mine, and whispered, "Can we just stay here today?" And I said the only thing I could. "Yes, but only if you promise to wear that shirt." She smiled, and this time, it reached the room. We didn't leave the apartment that day. We barely left the bed. Morning light faded into afternoon without our permission. Her legs stayed tangled with mine, her fingers occasionally drifting over my chest, like she was relearning the landscape of something half remembered, half denied. And she kept the shirt on, mostly. The buttons had been undone somewhere between one laugh and the next. I wasn't sure when. Maybe during that story I told her about the time I got caught in the rain wearing a tuxedo. Maybe when she told me she used to imagine herself on my balcony, pretending to light a cigarette just to feel what the wind from my street might taste like. Maybe when she looked at me and didn't look away. What I do remember is this. She kissed me like she knew it wouldn't fix anything, and I kissed her like I didn't care. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't desperate. It was slower than memory, warmer than apology. When her lips trailed down my neck, when her thighs pressed against mine with that unspoken rhythm of, "I'm still here," when the cotton of my shirt brushed my ribs before slipping away entirely, there were no questions left between us, no unfinished sentences, just skin and breath, and a silence filled with things we finally let say themselves. She fell asleep on my chest that night, her hair spread like ink across my collarbone, one arm tucked under her cheek, the other gripping my hand so loosely it felt like the end of a dream, the part where you know you're waking up but wish you weren't. I didn't sleep, not right away. Instead, I looked at the shirt, the one she'd worn, the one that lay now, crumpled, still warm, on the edge of the bed, like it was waiting to be folded back into memory. It smelled like her now, like lavender and linen, and something saltier, realer, closer to skin. And I wondered, not for the first time, if some clothes should never be washed, if letting them keep the scent of a night like this was the closest we ever got to bottling time. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember was waking up to an empty space beside me. The bedsheets were still warm. Her scent lingered, but she was gone. Not gone, gone. I could hear her in the kitchen, barefoot on the wooden floor, moving gently like someone trying not to wake the memory of what they just shared. I walked out, shirtless, the sheet loosely around my waist, half asleep and fully mesmerized. She was standing by the window, sunlight pouring over her shoulders, one of my mugs in her hand, and my shirt was back on, but differently this time, buttoned up all the way, neat, almost distant, like armor. She turned, smiling, but there was a pause behind her eyes, a breath she hadn't exhaled yet. "You slept hard," she said. "You disappeared," I replied. "I was making tea." "Were you?" She looked down at the mug, then nodded, and I needed a moment. That pause stretched again, wide enough to fit all the unspoken things we'd kept folded between us for months. "What kind of moment?" I asked. "The kind where you realize—" She stopped, struggling for words. "Maybe comfort is dangerous." I tilted my head. "Dangerous how?" She took a sip, exhaled. "Because it makes you think you're safe. And you're not." She stared into the mug like it held a crystal ball, then set it down gently on the table. "I'm still married," she said. There it was, like a match to a paper wall. "I thought," I began, but the sentence didn't know where to land. "We're separated, legally, emotionally, geographically." Her voice was flat, tired. "But technically, I still wear his name when I sign checks." I nodded slowly, not angry, not betrayed, just hollowed out a little. "Does he know you're here?" I asked. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I didn't plan this," she said. "Last night wasn't strategy. It was weakness." "Comfort," I offered. "Yes, and I'm terrified that I'll keep crawling back into comfort if I don't start making hard choices." Silence again. The kind that isn't passive, the kind that burns a little on the inside. "So, what happens now?" I asked. She walked over, placing her palm on my chest, right above where her head had rested all night. "I don't know, but I do know this." She leaned in, kissed the spot her fingers touched, then stepped back. "I'll either take that shirt off again because it belongs here, or because I need to return it." I nodded. Her voice cracked when she added, "And I honestly don't know which I hope it is." The room felt colder suddenly, or maybe just more honest. I reached for her hand, held it one last time like it wouldn't break anything further. "Whatever you decide," I whispered, "I'll keep the window open." And she smiled, not the playful smile of last night, not the sleepy smile of the morning, but the kind that says, "You mattered, even if I leave." I didn't expect her to return the next day, but I left the shirt folded anyway. Not in the drawer, not in the closet. I placed it where she'd find it, on the edge of the bed, collar up, sleeves still rolled the way she liked them. And it waited there like a page half turned. For a week, the bed stayed empty. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe the echo of her body stayed curled in the sheets long after she left. Maybe the air still held the rhythm of her breathing. Maybe memory has a way of pretending it's still present. The day she came back, It was raining, and for a moment, just from the sound of her footsteps in the hallway, I knew it was her. No knock, just the soft click of the key she hadn't returned. I turned, heart quiet but alert, and there she was, wearing no makeup, hair damp from the rain, umbrella forgotten somewhere between the street and the decision to come back, and in her hands, the shirt, pressed, folded, but not returned, offered. She didn't speak at first, just walked in, set it down gently on the bed, then stood there, quiet, still, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. "I didn't come to return it," she said finally. "I came to wear it again." My breath caught. She sat down, fingers trembling slightly as she began to unbutton her coat, not with seduction, but with deliberateness, like someone unpacking a truth too long avoided. Beneath the coat, she wore almost nothing, just the faintest slip of silk, like she knew what the night might ask of her, but wasn't entirely sure she'd answer. I knelt before her, took the shirt from where she'd placed it, shook it gently loose. "I kept it warm," I said. Her smile returned, the soft one, the one that never rushed. "Will you help me put it on?" she whispered. I did, carefully, like dressing something sacred. And for a moment, there we were again, her body slipping into cotton I'd worn, my hands folding around her wrists, drawing the buttons closed. But this time, I buttoned all of them, every one. And when I was done, I stepped back and asked, "Are you staying?" She paused. "I don't know," she said. "But tonight, I want to forget the questions, just for a while, just until the storm passes." That was all we needed. She curled into me again, same side of the bed, same rhythm of breath. But this time, she didn't fall asleep. Not right away. She traced lines on my chest with her fingertip, slow, aimless, like words never said. And then she whispered, "Do you think the body remembers?" "Remembers what?" I asked. "The way someone touched it, even years later." I didn't answer right away, because I knew it wasn't a question for me. Not really. It was for whoever came before, whoever left that fold in her, and maybe whoever might come after. But I said what I hoped was true. "I think the body remembers what was gentle." She leaned in, kissed just below my jaw. "Then maybe this will stay," she said. And I let her kiss me again, slowly, like the first time, like the last time, like every version of the in-between we'd refused to live. That night, we didn't make love. We unwrapped something slower, lingered inside each touch, like we were afraid it might be the last, or the first. And somewhere in the hours between midnight and maybe, the shirt came off again. But this time, she didn't leave it behind. She pressed it to her chest when we lay back, her arms wrapped around herself like she needed to hold something. Maybe that something was me. Maybe it was the version of herself that only existed here, in this room, in this bed, under this roof of sighs and unsent letters. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. She was in the kitchen, my shirt back on, her back to me, humming something low and familiar. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist. She leaned into me, and for the first time, I didn't ask if she was staying, because I didn't want to know yet. Some truths taste better slow. She poured 2 cups, no sugar in mine, just the way I liked it. And when she handed it to me, her eyes held that calm I hadn't seen before. "I wrote a note," she said, "in case I couldn't say it out loud." She reached into the pocket of my shirt, pulled out a folded piece of paper, placed it in my hand, and before I could open it, she stopped me. "Not yet," she said. "Wait until the coffee cools." I did, and when I opened the note, her handwriting was smaller than I remembered, tighter, like she wasn't ready to spill too much. But the words were hers, all of them. "I don't know if I'll stay, but I know where home feels like. And last night, I slept in it." I folded the note, tucked it back into the pocket of the shirt, the one she still wore, and said nothing, because sometimes silence is the only honest reply. She called me by someone else's name when we first met. Not out loud, no. She never said it, but I saw it in her eyes. The momentary flicker of confusion when I told her mine, as if it didn't quite fit the man she thought I might be, as if she was trying to replace someone. The hotel lounge was half empty that night. The piano player had just finished a tune I didn't recognize, and the only reason I even noticed her was the silence that followed. She was sitting at the end of the bar, glass half full, lipstick untouched. A woman waiting for something, or trying not to. I took the seat beside her. "I'm not who you think I am," I said. She turned slowly, looked me over once. "Then who are you?" I told her my name. She smiled, politely, not as if she'd heard it before, but as if it didn't matter. "May I use it?" she asked. "Use it?" "Just for the night. I don't need it to be true, only real enough to hold on to while it lasts." It was such an odd question, but it wasn't a come-on. It wasn't even flirtation. It was a request made gently, the kind that comes from someone who's tired of pretending they're okay on their own. So I said yes. And just like that, she used it. Casually, at first. Like a test. Like trying on a coat that didn't belong to her, to see if it felt warm. We didn't sleep together that night. Not yet. Instead, we talked. In the kind of low tones that never quite mean to confess, but always end up doing so anyway. She told me she was in town for a conference, that she wasn't sure what she wanted from the trip, that she'd packed 3 dresses, but only felt like wearing one, the simplest one, the one she was wearing now. I asked her if she was meeting someone. She said, "Not anymore." Then she looked down at her drink as if it had just asked her something she didn't want to answer. "You seem like the kind of man who would listen to a woman's silence," she said, not just her words. I don't know why that line stayed with me. Maybe because it was true. Maybe because I was just tired enough to hear it. When the bar closed, we walked the halls of the hotel like strangers in a dream. She didn't invite me to her room. She didn't have to. I invited her to mine. Not with words, just a glance held long enough to ask permission. She followed, and when we got there, she sat on the edge of the bed, looked around the room like it wasn't hers, like it wasn't mine either, like it was borrowed time in a borrowed life. "I won't take up space," she said softly. "You already do," I replied. Her eyes met mine. Then she did something I didn't expect. She slipped off her shoes, folded her legs beneath her on the bed, and said my name again, softly, like a question, like she needed to know it would still answer to her. I walked toward her, sat beside her, and she leaned into me, not with urgency, but with the weight of someone who needed not to be alone in their skin tonight. There's a difference between undressing and being undressed. She let me unbutton her blouse, one button, then two. She closed her eyes. "Can I use your name?" she whispered again. This time, with more than just my voice. I understood what she meant, and I let her. That night wasn't about sex. It wasn't about lust. It was about shelter, about finding something warm enough to slip into, even if it didn't belong to you forever. She lay in my bed wearing nothing but the sheet, my name on her lips, and a silence between us that didn't need filling. I watched her sleep, and I realized no one had ever borrowed me like this before. Not just the room, not just the night. Me, my name, my comfort, my quiet. When morning came, she wasn't gone. She was already awake, sitting by the window wrapped in the sheet, watching the city exhale steam into the cold dawn. She turned to me. "Thank you," she said, "for lending me something I couldn't ask for." I wanted to ask what it was, but I think I already knew. "It's yours," I said. "No," she whispered. "It's not. That's why it matters." Then she wrote something on the hotel notepad, folded it once, and placed it on the pillow where she'd slept. She kissed my cheek and left. I didn't open the note right away. I waited. Hours passed. I showered, dressed, packed. And just before I left the room, I opened it. All it said was, "If I ever say your name again, it'll be because it's the only one that fit." I didn't expect to see her again. That's how those nights go, usually. Brief, weightless, folded into memory, like a letter never mailed. You hold on to it, not because it meant everything, but because it meant something at the exact moment you needed it to. But 3 weeks later, I heard someone say my name again, softly, Not mine, really, just the one she used. I was standing in the middle of the train station bookstore, thumbing through the poetry section, when I felt the hush before a voice. The kind of silence your skin notices before your ears do. She was behind me, wearing a coat I didn't recognize, but the same perfume, like something from an old cabinet in a forgotten house. Warm, a little musky, faintly spiced. You still letting strangers borrow your name? She asked, a half smile on her lips. I turned, surprised, but not entirely. I thought you'd already returned it, I said. Her eyes flicked down to the book in my hand. I didn't think you'd be the poetry type, she said. I'm not, just searching for something that sounds like silence. She took the book from me, read a line on the page. And I loved you, not for your words, but the way they paused when you looked at me. She handed it back. You never called me by mine, she said softly. I never asked, and I never offered. We stood like that, surrounded by rows of printed things no one had time to read anymore, speaking like people who'd already said everything and still had more to say. This time, I asked. Her name. Not the borrowed kind, not the one I imagined. The real one. She hesitated, looked down at her hands, then said it, quietly, carefully, as if it might change something, and it did. I've got an hour, she said, before my train. 1 or 2 syllables, she laughed. What? Your name. I'd been imagining it was one, but now that I've heard it, I think it fits the pause. She didn't answer with words. She just slipped her arm through mine and led me out of the station. We didn't go far, just across the street to a narrow alley where a tea shop sat tucked between a second-hand bookstore and a tailor's shop. Inside, it smelled like lemon rind and worn linen. Time slowed. She ordered something warm. I ordered nothing. I wanted only to listen. I didn't forget the way you looked at me, she said. Which time? She smiled. The second, when I said your name like I meant it. I nodded. You did. Her fingers toyed with the porcelain rim of her cup. Steam curled between us like something unsaid. I was engaged, she said. I didn't flinch. Past tense? She nodded. He didn't know what to do with silence, or softness, or nights that didn't need fixing. And you? I wanted to be someone's pause, not their task. She looked up at me then, really looked. I still don't know what to call what we had. You don't have to name it. I borrowed your name, she said again. But I think you gave me something else. What? A version of myself I didn't think still existed. I exhaled. That kind of ache, the one that comes when you realize you mattered more than you were allowed to. Her train time crept closer. She stood. I want to tell you something, she said, suddenly serious. She reached into her coat, pulled out a folded note, the kind hotels leave beside beds, with the city's skyline etched faintly along the border. "I wrote this the next morning," she said, "but I never meant to send it." I hesitated, then took it, unfolded it, and read. I needed a name that wouldn't hurt, one that didn't ask me who I'd been, but let me breathe into who I could be, just for a night. Thank you for being that name. When I looked up, her eyes were shining. She leaned in, whispered something into my ear, something I won't write down, because some words are meant to live only once in breath, not ink. Then she was gone. But this time, I knew she wouldn't forget my name, and I'd never hear hers without remembering how she said mine, like it had once saved her. The next time wasn't planned either. It never is with her. She showed up again, this time at my door. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind where time drips off rooftops and windows blur the outside world. I just brewed tea, something mild, herbal, the kind meant for quiet. Then came the knock, soft, 2 taps, a pause, one more. I opened it, expecting a delivery, and there she was, rain in her hair, lips slightly parted like she might apologize, but didn't. A coat too thin for the season, and that same worn envelope clutched in her hand. Not the same note as before, a new one, unsent again. I didn't have anywhere else I wanted to be tonight, she said. No greeting, no explanation. Just that. I stepped aside. She stepped in. The air changed. She walked slowly, taking in my place like a museum. Books she hadn't touched, a record player in the corner, shoes neatly lined up by the wall. I watched her fingers hover above the spine of a book she didn't open. "You keep your silence in order," she said. "I try." She turned to me. "Can I make it a little messy tonight?" I nodded. She set the envelope on the table, peeled off her coat, slowly, and let it drop to the floor without folding it. Underneath, she wore a linen dress, thin, the kind that remembered every crease. "You haven't asked why I'm here," she said, almost challenging. "I figured you'd tell me if it mattered." She smiled, something like relief and something else. I handed her the cup of tea. She took it with both hands, sipped, then moved to the window. We stood like that for a while, saying nothing, letting the rain say it all. Then she turned, walked up to me, and said the words that stayed with me long after she left. "Tonight, I don't want to be seen. I want to be remembered by you, only you. I want to know what it's like to be borrowed back." I didn't ask what she meant. Not then. I just took her hand, led her to the couch. She sat, waited. I knelt in front of her, undoing the buttons of her dress, one by one, not out of hunger, but out of reverence, not for her skin, but for what she was shedding, a version of herself the world had asked to be quiet. Underneath, she wore nothing, only herself. And for a moment, that seemed like the bravest thing I'd ever seen. She looked at me. "Say my name," she whispered. I did. Not the one she gave strangers, the real one. And she closed her eyes, letting it settle on her skin like breath. That night, I didn't make love to her. I stayed close, traced her shoulders with my thumb, listened to her breathing shift from cautious to safe. She curled into me, the curve of her spine pressed against my chest. One leg tangled over mine like a question mark she didn't need answered. At one point, she turned, rested her palm on my chest, felt my heartbeat. "This," she whispered, "is the only place I've ever wanted to disappear into." I didn't know how to hold that kind of weight, so I kissed her forehead, not out of romance, out of permission. We fell asleep like that, her breath warming the hollow of my neck. No alarms, no promises, only stillness, the kind you don't get to keep, but you do get to remember. And I did, especially when I woke up the next morning to find her gone again. No trace of her, except the teacup on the windowsill, half full, and the envelope, unopened. But this time, it had my name written across the front. It was a Tuesday when I saw her again, but not in the way I wanted, not in the way I remembered her, barefoot on my couch, tea in her hand, wearing silence like silk. This time, she was across the room in a gallery. Not alone. A man stood beside her, polished, confident, one hand on the small of her back, as if he had a claim to places I'd only been allowed to borrow. She laughed, softly, like she did when she slept against my chest and mumbled words she never said awake. I stood there, invisible to everyone except myself. And the painting. It was the reason I'd come. A portrait hanging quietly on a wall of unnamed works. Oil on canvas. Muted tones. Cracked paint. Soft shadows. And in the center, unmistakably, her. Not a perfect likeness, but the softness of her jaw, the knowing in her mouth, the glance over her shoulder. It was her in memory. Her, how I remembered her, titled only, Borrowed Light. There was no artist name listed, but I didn't need one. She hadn't seen me. Or maybe she had, and pretended she hadn't. I didn't stay. That night, I walked home with questions I didn't want answers to. Was I ever more than a moment she needed? Did I want to be? Or was she the kind of woman who gives only what the night allows, and nothing more? When I got home, the envelope was still there. The one she left the second time, still unopened. I'd kept it on the shelf, in the same place I kept postcards from cities I'd never been to, as if the distance somehow made them more meaningful. This time, I opened it. Inside, a single line, handwritten. Your name sounds softer in my mouth than mine ever did. No signature, no date, just the shape of her thoughts, left behind. Weeks passed. No messages, no rain-soaked arrivals, no more letters. But some nights like this, I could still smell her on the fabric of the throw pillow she once held against her stomach. Still hear the hush between her words when she didn't know how to stay. Still remember the way she said my name when she wasn't trying to be anyone else. It was a strange intimacy, what we had. Brief but lingering, like steam on a bathroom mirror. I saw her one last time, not in person, but in a magazine. She was being interviewed, featured for her work in anonymous portraiture. The headline read, "The Woman Who Paints Without Owning." She said she found faces in places she didn't belong, that she never stayed long, that the best art comes from the memory of closeness, not closeness itself. And at the end of the article, when asked if she ever painted someone she loved, she said, "I don't paint the people I love. I love the people I don't have to explain." I closed the magazine, and for the first time, I smiled without aching. She had never belonged to me, but I'd been hers for one night, two, if you count the one she left me a name. And now, when I think of her, I don't think of loss. I think of the space she made in me, the way she used my name like a doorway, the way she taught me how to whisper with my hands, the way silence filled the room after she left, and how I stopped needing to fill it, because she wasn't meant to stay. She was meant to be remembered, and I do. There are women who leave with nothing, and then there are women who leave behind just enough to make you ache. She left a slip, silk, faintly blue, thin as a whisper, draped casually over the back of my reading chair like it had always belonged there. I stared at it for 3 days before touching it, and when I finally did, it felt like her, or what remained of her, cool, soft, full of memory. But let me start before she left anything behind, back to the night she asked me, with a quiet so sharp it hurt, "Do you ever let someone stay, even when you know they'll leave?" I didn't answer then, not out loud. She already knew the answer, because she was asking while standing in front of me in that same slip, shoulder strap fallen, the hem like a secret brushing against her thigh, barefoot, unbrushed hair, eyes that hadn't blinked since the question left her mouth. We hadn't touched yet. The air between us was electric with the possibility of it, and still, she didn't move. She was waiting to be refused, or invited in. I invited her, not with words, but with the way I stepped aside, letting the lamplight hit her bare arm, the way I reached for her wrist with a reverence I hadn't used in years. She exhaled, not relief, more like surrender, like I'd become the answer to a question she'd tried not to ask herself for too long. She didn't come to my apartment with plans to stay. That much was obvious. She carried no bag, no phone charger, not even a toothbrush, just her coat. And that slip, worn under it. I remember how she laughed when I noticed. It's dramatic, I know, but sometimes you want to be remembered for how you arrived, not how you left. That line stayed with me, like the scent she left on my pillow, or the way she held my face when she kissed me, like I was glass and she'd broken things before. The first night, we didn't sleep, not out of lust, but out of defiance. We sat on the floor, backs against the bookshelves, drinking wine we both pretended to enjoy. She asked me strange questions. What would you do if you woke up in someone else's body? Have you ever kept a photo you should have deleted? Do you think the body remembers hands more than names? I asked none in return. She noticed. You're afraid of asking the kind of questions that come with memories attached. She wasn't wrong, but it wasn't fear. It was self-preservation. I had loved before, loudly, carelessly, the kind of love that doesn't leave room for silence. And then came her, all silence, and that slip. By the third night, she had started drawing lines on the fogged bathroom mirror after her showers. Not messages, just shapes, half circles, spirals, things without names. I never wiped them away. They disappeared on their own, just like her. But not yet. On the fifth night, I cooked. Pasta. Nothing remarkable. She sat cross-legged on my kitchen counter, watching me like she was memorizing the way I moved, as if she'd never see it again. She didn't say much, but before we ate, she did something that made my chest tighten. She reached for my glasses, gently took them off, and placed them on her face. You're not as blurry as I thought, she whispered, blinking. And then she kissed me, just once. And I understood. She wanted to belong to the night, not the morning. The slip came later, a night after we shared the kind of silence that only happens after bodies fold into each other without needing to explain why. She stood by the window, wrapped in my blanket, looking out at nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her silhouette, how it swayed gently like a memory not ready to settle. When I got up to join her, she turned, held me, kissed the place behind my ear, and said, "Don't walk me down. Just let me vanish." And so I did. No goodbyes, no door clicks, just the whisper of silk slipping off her body and staying behind. In the morning, the chair held what I didn't, that slip, and an emptiness I didn't know how to fold away. I didn't sit in that chair again for weeks. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It had held her. And some things, once held, keep holding, even when they're gone. There are silences that feel like sound. The absence she left behind, though wordless, echoed in every corner of my apartment. And it wasn't just the slip. It was where she used to stand by the window, still barefoot, holding tea she rarely finished. It was how the bookshelf suddenly looked uneven, without her shoulder grazing it when she leaned for a title she'd never read. It was the way the chair, that chair, stared at me now, as if asking when I dare to sit in it again. But I didn't. Not yet. Because sitting there meant admitting something lingered, and I wasn't ready for that. On the sixth day, I opened the slip drawer in my dresser, not to put hers in it, to see what else I'd kept from women who had left. There was nothing, not a single token, no lipstick-stained napkins, no long-forgotten earrings, no saved voicemails I pretended I didn't replay. Just this one, her slip, soft, faint blue, still warm with the idea of her. I began to remember things I hadn't thought mattered, like how she never let the kettle whistle, she always caught it just before, or how she slept, curled away from me, but her hand would always reach back to rest somewhere on my chest, as if reminding both of us she was still there. The way she looked at books without reading the titles, as if she was choosing by scent, not story. She had names for things in my apartment. The hallway light she called the moon. My ashtray was your thinking bowl. The rug was the place we pretended wasn't cold. She renamed my world and then left it. I kept her slip where she left it, on the back of the chair, for a while, until one night, too late, too quiet, and too alone, I folded it, not to erase her, but to stop hurting when I walked past it. I wrapped it in one of my old t-shirts, placed it in the bottom drawer, buried beneath worn flannel and forgotten scarves. But memory doesn't stay folded. 2 weeks later, I found a note, tucked inside my copy of The Unbearable Lightness of Being, the book she touched but never opened. The handwriting was hers, delicate and sharp, the way she spoke when she was nervous. Don't worry. I never wanted to be permanent. Just real. Just real. That line felt more intimate than anything we'd said in bed, because that's what she was. Not a fantasy, not a passing flame, but real. For a moment, like lightning behind closed eyelids. After that, she showed up everywhere, not physically, but in the way I paused at doorways, thinking I'd hear her humming again. In the tea aisle, reaching for her favorite jasmine blend even though I didn't drink it. In the mirror, where I looked more tired, but somehow gentler. She changed nothing, and yet everything felt different. I saw her again, briefly, from across the street, a bookstore window between us. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and chose not to look twice. She was laughing with someone else, holding a copy of a book I didn't recognize, wearing different eyes, happier ones maybe, but her mouth, that mouth still knew the name of my skin. I turned before the ache had time to reach my spine. Back home, I took out the slip, unwrapped it, smoothed the silk across my hands, and for a moment, just one, I let it rest on my shoulder, let it whisper what her body never said out loud, that not every woman who leaves truly disappears. Some remain in fibers, in scents, in silence, in chairs that were never meant to be shared. I didn't expect the craving. Not for her body, not exactly, but for the moment right before she took something off. That slow pause, the way she stood, backlit, half in shadow, as if waiting for permission to keep going. She always smiled before slipping the strap from her shoulder, like she knew I would watch, and I always did, even when I pretended not to. The apartment felt colder now, but not in temperature. In temperature, it was the same. Her thermostat settings still lived in my fingertips, but the heat was gone. The kind that lingered in the sheets even after you made the bed. The kind that sat in the room like a second skin after two bodies forgot what clothes were for. I hadn't touched anyone since her, not for lack of chance. There was someone at the cafe who kept asking about my books. Another at the bookstore who pressed her number inside a receipt. But none of them looked at chairs the way she did. None of them knew what it meant to leave behind just enough silk and no explanation. On a night when the lights flickered and the rain came too fast, I poured wine. The same red she once spilled across her thigh and said, "Now you have to kiss it off." I did. And I remember her laugh when I stayed too long. I brought the glass to the chair, the one she left her slip on, and I sat, for the first time since she left. The fabric still remembered her, or maybe it remembered us, the way she bent forward just enough for her neckline to sigh, the way she leaned into kisses like she was offering a secret. Not her lips. I didn't mean to close my eyes, but I did. And in that quiet, I let her back in. I unbuttoned my shirt, not out of desire, but out of something quieter. That slow ache of needing to feel human again. The air kissed my chest, my neck, the place her palm used to rest when she whispered before sleep. I like your skin better when it's breathing. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. I placed her slip in my lap, ran my fingers down the edge the way I used to run them along her spine, just before she arched back into me with that half-breath, half-prayer sound. I said her name, once, soft, not to call her, but to remember how it felt on my tongue when it wasn't empty. I remembered the night she first wore it. We hadn't planned on staying in. She showed up wearing it beneath her coat, as if she knew what I needed before I did. "Tell me I can take this off," she said. "You always could," I replied. But that night, she didn't. She danced in it, lit candles, read her favorite line from a poem with nothing beneath the slip but moonlight and sin. We never made it to dinner. Now the candlelight was mine, the poem half remembered, and the sin, just silence. But even then, even in that silence, I wanted her back, not to stay, just to take off the slip, just once more, in front of me. That night, I slept with the slip beside my pillow, not holding it, just knowing it was there. And I dreamed. God, I dreamed of her breath near my collar, her knees on either side of my lap, her voice like silk saying, "You know I didn't leave all of me behind." And when I woke, my hands were empty, but my skin remembered everything. It wasn't the slip that haunted me. It was where she left it, That chair, where she never sat long, but always left something behind. A perfume trace, a laugh, a button she loosened, but never fastened again. Or, once, her silence. She could sit like she was ready to leave and stay like she'd never go. But when she left the slip, she didn't leave a note, not a single word, just silk, still warm, still shaped to her hips. I began to visit that chair more often, not to sit, but to remember the slope of her spine as she reached for her heels, the way she bent to whisper at the edge of my bed, the way she slept, never curled, always open, as if to say, if you want to touch me, you don't have to ask. She never made me ask, but she made me want to, and that was more dangerous. I found myself setting a second wine glass, lighting a second candle, folding a second towel in the bathroom. The rituals of a man who knows she's not coming back, but still hopes the ghost of her might. Sometimes I laid the slip across the chair like an offering. Other times, I wore it, not on me, but over her memory, draped across the door handle, like a curtain I could pull closed on certain days, and reopen when I needed to feel less alone. I met someone new, eventually. She noticed the slip, asked if it was mine. It belonged to someone I used to know, I said. But that wasn't true. It didn't belong to her. It was her. More than her voice. More than the songs she used to hum in the kitchen without realizing. More than her body, which had been mine in ways I didn't understand until long after it wasn't. That slip was a language, and I still spoke it when no one was listening. One night, the new woman stayed over. She lit candles. She wore something soft. She tried, but she didn't know how to look back at me from across the room while undressing like a question I had to answer with my breath. She didn't know how to pause just before touching my chest, as if to ask, do you want this? Or do you want her? The answer, that night, was silence. I watched the new woman sleep. She curled into herself, as if afraid of waking with someone she didn't recognize. And I got out of bed and sat in the chair, with the slip in my lap. I never told her why I couldn't stay with her. Not really. She assumed it was timing. Maybe it was. But some memories don't leave space for replacements. Some clothes don't come off clean. Some touches stay, even when the skin no longer does. Weeks later, I packed the slip in a box, not because I was over her, but because I wasn't, and I wanted to try, just once, to remember her without silk, to remember her laugh, her sleepy hums, the way she once drew a heart on the fogged-up mirror after we made love on a Tuesday afternoon. But even then, when I shut the box, I could still smell her. I gave the chair away. Too dramatic? Maybe. But every time I passed it, I remembered her thighs over its edge, her hands holding the hem of the slip, lifting it just enough, the look in her eyes that said, "This is how I say goodbye." without saying it. She never did say goodbye, and that's what made it linger. Months later, I walked into a vintage store, not looking for anything, but I stopped. Because there, on a mannequin, was a slip. Not hers, not exactly, but the color, the cut, the neckline that knew how to fall forward just enough. And for a second, I smelled wine, saw candlelight, felt a pair of legs wrap around my waist as she whispered, "Tell me you'll remember this, even when I'm not something you can touch anymore." I didn't buy the slip, but I stood there for a long time, letting it hurt, letting it touch something I hadn't let anything else touch in a while. Not my skin, but the space just behind it, the part of me that still waits for her, or someone like her, or just the moment before the strap falls. Not every ending has closure. Some just leave a slip on a chair in the shape of a body in a bed you never made again. But tonight I'll light a candle, just one. Pour a glass of wine and sit where the chair used to be. No slip, no body, no goodbye, just memory. And maybe that's what she left behind. Not the silk, but the wanting. If you're still awake, maybe it's not the stories you stayed for. Maybe it's the feeling they left behind. The way a shirt holds warmth. The way your name sounds when someone else says it like it's theirs. The way a silk slip can haunt a chair long after she's gone. Tonight, we didn't just remember her. We kept her in the folds, in the hush, in the places only you and the dark can reach. So rest now. Let the silence settle. And if your heart stirs, that's all right. Some stories don't end. They just linger, like the scent on the thing she left behind. Good night.